Okay, so Contagious, I'll talk a little bit about us to start with. We're an agency from the UK. We've been around, we actually just celebrated our 18th birthday. We had an incredible 18th birthday party just the other week, which was great. But we design and deliver experiences for drinks brands, being based in Edinburgh. Is a hotbed of whiskey, and that's where we started 18 years ago, working with whiskey brands. But we deliver what we call experiences. Now, experiences in our eyes are things like ambassador toolkits. That's one for Ardbeg there. Brand homes. We have an interior design section that create brand homes, which alongside distilleries. Brand academies, a lot of education for bartenders, on and off trade actually, and also consumers. Trade advocacy programs going into the on and off premise. Retail and POS materials. So if you're in the off or if the off-premise or GTR elements in there, trade shows, pop-ups, social media and comms, all those kind of things we call experiences, brand experiences. Every time a consumer has a touch point with your brand, that's what we call an experience. On top of all those experiences there, packaging for us is probably one of the most important chances for a brand to talk to a consumer. And that's really because you can see here, from our experience, TV commercials, you only get 30 seconds generally to spend with a consumer. Social media, you maybe get a little bit more once you start getting the conversation going, can go up to maybe 2 minutes, maybe more over a period of time. Retail, generally only 3 to 5 minutes. Trade show, like you'll know today, maybe you'll browse 10 to 15 minutes, you'll go back. Brand home, obviously you're going to make a visit to a brand home, so you might spend half a day, 2 to 3 hours, half a day, maybe a little bit longer. And then an academy, a special academy, if you're invited along, maybe that's a bit longer, half a day to even a day. Difference with packaging, it pretty much, that communication lasts for the entire lifespan of that product and sometimes beyond, and we'll go on to that. So it's very important to try and convey your brand values on this piece of packaging, because you've got such a long period of time to communicate with your consumer. It's very important that you get the communication absolutely correct. So one thing, you're having to communicate your own brand message. Another thing, you're having to make sure you communicate to the consumer the message that they want to hear as well. So you've got to really understand what it is that your consumer is expecting and how they're feeling too. So that's a real challenge of an agency like ours, and obviously of brands, is to understand what your audience is requiring and what they are expecting from that piece of communication. So what I've done just now is I've created these I found these 5 insights, which I think it's really to get the ball rolling, and it gives us an indication of that by no means a complete list, but it gives you an idea of the type of things of the direction travel that we think that the consumers are expecting. So I'll start with probably the most obvious. I've called this Leave No Trace, but obviously it's all about sustainability. Sustainability is probably at the forefront of everybody's mind at the moment. Obviously with Greta Thunberg and her trip to the US. There was over 4 million people marched in 4,500 locations across 150 countries as a result of her drive for the Friday strikes, which I think is absolutely amazing. And as I think everybody will know, packaging has got such an important role to play in sustainability, and with the materials that we're using, it's one area that innovation is going to be really driven, is the sustainable materials in there. Now, this is an example, just to demonstrate where some innovation is taking place. These are incredible seaweed pouches. So this is London Marathon last year, actually this year. And the London Marathon usually disposes of over 1 million plastic bottles during the marathon itself. So this year, a company called Skipping Rocks Lab, they created these lovely little seaweed pouches and handed out these energy drinks to all the marathon runners. And by doing that, they managed to save 200,000 plastic bottles through the course of the marathon. So that you can see how just by doing a simple change of materials been a little bit more innovative. It's saved 200,000 plastic bottles from the streets of London, which I think is really incredible. These are made from a material called nopla, which I think is just short for not plastic, really. But they're made out of seaweed. You can either eat them, so you're digestible, or if you throw them away, they'll degrade very quickly as well. So that's one great example of the materials that you can use to make a difference. My second point, again, this is kind of about sustainability too, but what I found really interesting actually, because I thought it'd be much higher. There's only 7% of consumers actually buy direct from online, whereas 73% actually use a mixture of channels to purchase. Now, when you think about it, I guess it's not that crazy, because you maybe buy online, but you'll have looked in the off-premise. You maybe experienced it in the on-premise, and you'll maybe go through GTR, and then you maybe buy online. So it's this combination of channels where you're experiencing packaging. And this is the fact that we have to, as a brand and as an agency, consider that there are lots of different channels that consumers find your product, whether it's through the on-premise, whether it's through the off-premise, whether it's through through e-commerce, whether it's through GTR. All these different channels mean that you've got to consider packaging, I think, in how this gets to the consumer. Now, this is an example I've drawn out here. This is Heppel Gin, they're a Northumbrian gin company, and a friend of mine, Nick Strangeway, who creates this gin. But Taylor Elementary, which is a new pretty cool bar in London, have asked for all their brands to be supplied in jerry cans, and they decant all the brands supplied into their own packaging. Now, they get a shout out on the menu, they get a shout out on the bottle, but their back bar is made up of totally their own bottles. There is no brand presence at all, other than on menu and other than on this small packaging here. And what Nick has to do is he has to supply them in these jerry cans here. So there's a difference in how that's been supplied and how your brand's getting across in the on-premise in this kind of scenario, compared to, for example, so that's probably, you're trying to consider the waste and the energy reduction in supplying your packaging in that way. Whereas in the off-premise, obviously your packaging is it's an immediate reaction from a consumer, so you have to think about the attractiveness of that packaging in the off-premise. E-commerce, you've got to be thinking about the protection. You don't want to have a bottle arrive or a spirit arrive and it's been broken in the post, so you're thinking about different things again. GTR, different again. You've got to think about the portability. You don't want to be left alone in the GTR because people can't take it with them. You need to be thinking about how people are going to take it through, how consumers are going to take it through to their destination. So I think that's another point, is always thinking about the appropriateness of the materials depending on the channel. Third insight, or kind of trend, connectivity. Now, this is definitely a way that obviously a lot of packaging, not only packaging is going, but a lot of communication is going. How do you connect? There's an ability to connect through technology a consumer with your product. With obviously some of the areas we were talking about earlier about running education programs and academies where you can bring people to your production facilities, but not everybody can do that. So using packaging as a way of telling your consumer an extra level of information is really important. It opens up a great channel of communication with your consumers. This is quite interesting. So Cisco forecasts that there'll be 50 billion devices will be on the Internet of Things by 2020. That's only next year. 50 billion devices will be connected to the Internet. That's incredible. So obviously technology is shifting from brands to consumers. Consumers who can access about business and their products more easily than ever. So you've got to think about what that communication is going to be. You've got to make sure not only does it give you the opportunity to talk about your brand and maybe the production, but you've also got to make sure you're completely transparent. Consumers can find out about your brand easier than ever. So why not take the lead in that and use your product, your packaging to actually tell people about that. Let's start there. There's a global smart packaging market is set to grow 5.5% over the next decade to reach $52 billion by 2025. So an incredible growth in this area. Yeah, but this is 19 Crimes as an example I've put up there. I don't know if anybody knows about 19 Crimes. It's been around a few years. This is an Australian wine company. They had a range of 7 wines. They called their range 19 Crimes. Now this was because of obviously the way Australia was generally populated was through criminals from the UK were deported to the US, and they were deported because there was 19 crimes that if you committed, rather than sentenced to death or put into prison in the UK, you were deported down to Australia. I thought it was quite interesting. One of these crimes was impersonating an Egyptian. Apparently that was, you ended up in Australia for impersonating an Egyptian, so that was quite interesting. Another one was stealing fish from a pond. Obviously you're heading to Australia if you do that. And another one, counterfeiting the copper coin. So I think those 3 things, one or more of these 19 crimes, you end up in Australia. So I thought that was quite interesting. But what these labels do is really, you download your app, you can hold them up to the label, and it starts telling the story of the 19 crimes as well as the extension of the range as well. Very simple application, really simple to download. According to Samantha Collins, who's a director at Treasury Wines Estates, who these wine ranges from, this has resulted in a growth of 60% in volume and 70% in value for this range of wines. An incredible result because of that. Fourth on authenticity. As an agency, we work an awful lot in some high-value products, specifically whiskey. We worked on a Curaçao, which is 1960, which is now worth over £100,000 a bottle. Gordon MacPhail, we have some of the oldest whiskey there, is now worth £30,000 to £40,000 a bottle. So what we're seeing as another trend for not only consumers, but a result of some of the value of these liquids is how do you prove the authenticity of this liquid? We've got companies like Authentics, which are really pushing the boundaries here. They're doing things like, that's Authentics there, they're doing things like self-destructible seals. So as soon as the seal is broken on the top of your bottle, it can never be replaced, so you can tell that it's been tampered with. Machine-readable labels, things like downloadable apps, so that you can automatically see with a scan of your bottle whether it's been tampered with and it's a real thing. And through smartphone authentication as well. So again, linked to an app. Something that's really interesting, not necessarily going to work with whiskey, molecular markers. Now this is an incredible piece of technology where they're inserting markers into the liquid, so you can tell by scanning whether that is the authentic liquid. Obviously, if you put that into whiskey, it's no longer whiskey, but it will work with other spirits and other liquids. Also developing things like security inks, where you can tell by the makeup of that ink that that's only the one compound that this particular company and this particular brand will result. So you can get bespoke inks on your label, so it's obviously authentic. Really interesting development as well, but obviously more for the higher end product. Personalization. This is the final one of my insights here. Johnny Walker obviously captured a bit of the market here with being able to personalize bottles. So you connect online, create your own label. Brilliant for gifting. But also what's quite interesting on the My Edition version here is they've got a great application where you can feeding all your personal likes and dislikes, and they will recommend a particular blend for you, which will suit you for your lifestyle. So personalising to your particular taste, and that's really an interesting development on personalisation. And actually, I think what I've said here, consumers who are actually been proven to pay 20% more for a personalised product, so something that connects more with you. People will pay more for that, so that's really interesting. So really, my challenge and as an agency, what we're having to deal with all the time now is try and tackle all this drive of direction. We've got to be mindful of materials, make sure the material is really appropriate, channel appropriate, make sure that we're designing for the particular route to market. We're considering how they're connected the product packaging in and making sure we're taking advantage of that ability to be able to bump the communication up. Protected from copycats. Obviously, the authentication is very important, and personalization, which is a great opportunity for us as well.